In the heart of Texas, where the land stretched endlessly and the sky seemed to touch the earth, there lived a man named Jed. He was no ordinary cowboy. His name carried weight in every saloon, trading post, and ranch across the West. Known for his fiery temper and piercing gaze, Jed wasn't someone you wanted to cross. Yet beneath that tough exterior lay a sense of justice so strong it sometimes surprised even him. His days were spent riding through dusty trails, tending to his modest ranch, and keeping to himself. But everything changed one fateful afternoon, when he heard something that would ignite a fire inside him like never before. It happened at a small trading post on the edge of town. The air was thick with heat, and the smell of leather and sweat hung heavy around the wooden stalls. Jed had stopped there to rest his horse and pick up supplies. As he leaned against a fence, sipping water from his canteen, he overheard voices coming from a nearby saloon. At first they were just muffled murmurs, but then certain words caught his attention, words that made his grip tighten on the canteen until his knuckles turned white. "3 sisters," one voice said, followed by laughter. "Young ones, barely teenagers." Another voice chimed in. "Their stepmother's selling them off to pay her debts." Jed froze. His mind raced as the reality of what he'd heard sank in. 3 young girls, innocent, defenseless, being sold like cattle because their stepmother cared more about money than their lives. It was unthinkable, yet here it was happening right under his nose. For a moment, anger overwhelmed him. He clenched his fist so hard that his nails dug into his palms. How could anyone treat children this way? What kind of world allowed such cruelty to exist? Instead of walking away or pretending he hadn't heard anything, Jed did what he always did when faced with injustice. He acted. Pushing himself off the fence, he marched toward the saloon with purpose. The sound of his boots hitting the ground echoed loudly, drawing curious glances from passers-by. When he reached the entrance, he paused for a brief second, took a deep breath, and stepped inside. The scene before him confirmed everything he'd feared. The saloon was dimly lit, filled with cigar smoke and the clinking of glasses. Around a large wooden table sat several men, their faces rough and weathered, their laughter loud and cruel. In the corner of the room, huddled together like frightened animals, were 3 young girls. Their clothes were worn and dirty, their faces streaked with tears. They looked terrified, clutching each other tightly as if trying to shield themselves from the horrors unfolding around them. Standing near the table was a woman, clearly their stepmother, counting coins with a greedy gleam in her eyes. She didn't even glance at the girls as though they meant nothing to her. Jed's jaw tightened as he scanned the room. These men weren't just negotiating a deal, they were treating the girls like property, discussing prices and making crude jokes. His stomach churned with disgust. Without thinking twice, he strode straight to the table, his presence commanding immediate attention. The chatter died down as all eyes turned to him. Some of the men sneered, others looked wary, but none dared to speak. The stepmother glanced up briefly, annoyance flashing across her face before she returned to counting her coins. "This ends now," Jed said, his voice low and steady, cutting through the silence like a knife. Every word carried the weight of authority, leaving no room for argument. The men exchanged uneasy glances, unsure how to respond to this sudden intrusion. One of them finally spoke up, his tone mocking. "And who are you to decide that, cowboy?" Jed didn't answer. Instead, he slammed his fist onto the table with such force that it sent glasses tumbling to the floor. The sharp crack of wood splitting echoed through the room, silencing everyone once again. Even the stepmother stopped what she was doing, her hands frozen mid-air. "I said," Jed repeated, his voice louder this time, "this ends now." There was no mistaking the fury in his eyes, nor the determination etched onto his face. For a moment, nobody moved. Then slowly one of the men stood up, raising his hands in mock surrender. All right. No need to get violent." But Jed wasn't finished. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out a heavy bag of gold coins, the result of years of hard work and saving. He tossed it onto the table with a thud, scattering the coins already there. "These girls aren't for sale," he declared, his voice ringing out clearly. "Not today. Not ever." The stepmother's eyes widened as she stared at the bag, torn between greed and fear. After a tense moment, she snatched it up, weighing it in her hands before stuffing it into her apron. Without another word, she turned and hurried out of the saloon, leaving the girls behind. For a while, no one spoke. The men watched Jed warily, unsure whether to challenge him or simply let it go. Eventually, one by one, they began to disperse, muttering under their breaths as they left. Soon only Jed and the three sisters remained. The girls still huddled together, too scared to move. Jed approached them slowly, careful not to startle them further. Crouching down to their level, he softened his expression, letting them see that he wasn't like the others. "You're safe now," he said gently. "No one's going to hurt you anymore." At first, the girls didn't respond. Their wide eyes searched his face, trying to determine if they could trust him. Finally, the eldest, one with long, tangled hair and tear-streaked cheeks, nodded hesitantly. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Jed gave her a small smile, though his heart ached at the sight of their frailty and fear. He knew he couldn't undo what had been done to them, but he could give them a chance to heal, to live a life free from pain and exploitation. Without wasting another moment, Jed led the girls outside. His horse waited patiently outside the saloon, its reins tied loosely to a post. Helping the sisters onto a nearby wagon, he climbed onto his horse and began leading them away from the chaos of the trading post. As they rode through the barren landscape, the sun beating down mercilessly, Jed couldn't help but wonder what lay ahead. Taking in 3 young girls was no small responsibility, especially for someone like him who had always preferred solitude. But as he glanced back at the wagon, seeing the girls sitting quietly together, he felt a strange sense of resolve wash over him. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he was ready to face them, for their sake. The journey back to his ranch was long and silent, save for the rhythmic clopping of hooves against the dry earth. Along the way, Jed tried to piece together fragments of their story. Through broken sentences and whispered answers, he learned their names: Lila, Rose, and Daisy. Their father had passed away years ago, leaving them vulnerable to their stepmother's cruelty. Since then, they had been subjected to neglect, hunger, and abuse. Now, with nowhere else to go, they clung to each other for survival. Listening to their tragic tale only strengthened Jed's resolve to protect them. By the time they reached his ranch, a humble yet welcoming place nestled between rolling hills and vast fields, the sun was beginning to set, casting golden hues across the horizon. Dismounting his horse, Jed helped the girls down from the wagon, his movements deliberate and gentle. Though exhaustion weighed heavily on their shoulders, there was a flicker of hope in their eyes, a spark that hadn't been there before. And, as Jed ushered them inside, promising warmth, food, and safety, he realized that perhaps saving these girls wasn't just an act of kindness. It was a chance for him to find redemption in a world that often felt cold and unforgiving. The first few days at Jed's ranch were a whirlwind of emotions for both him and the 3 sisters. The girls, Lila, Rose, and Daisy, were overwhelmed by their new surroundings. Everything seemed so different from the harsh life they had known before. The ranch was modest but welcoming, with its wooden cabin nestled among tall trees and fields that stretched as far as the eye could see. For the first time in years, they felt safe, though trust didn't come easily to them. Every sound outside made them jump, every shadow reminded them of the past. But Jed was patient, understanding that healing would take time. Jed did his best to make them comfortable. He showed them where they could sleep, a small room he had hastily cleaned and prepared for them. It wasn't much, with only a couple of cots and some blankets, but it was theirs. He cooked simple meals for them, even though cooking wasn't something he was particularly good at. Burnt beans and overcooked corn became their nightly dinners, but none of them complained. To the girls, it was more food than they had seen in weeks. After eating, Jed would sit by the fireplace cleaning his rifle or mending tools while the girls huddled together on the floor, watching him quietly. Sometimes he'd catch one of them staring at him, their eyes filled with curiosity and lingering fear. When that happened, he'd offer a small smile, hoping to reassure them. During the day, Jed taught the girls how to care for the animals and tend to the land. Lila, the eldest, proved to be quick to learn. She helped Jed milk the cows and gather eggs from the chickens. Her hands trembled at first, unused to such tasks, but she soon grew confident under his guidance. Rose, the middle sister, preferred staying close to the house. She spent hours wandering around the property, collecting wildflowers and arranging them into makeshift bouquets. Her laughter, soft and hesitant at first, began to fill the air as she discovered beauty in the simplest things. Little Daisy, full of energy despite everything she had endured, followed Jed everywhere. Whether he was chopping wood or fixing fences, she tagged along, peppering him with questions about the ranch and its animals. Despite these moments of progress, there were still nights when the darkness brought back memories too painful to bear. Lila often woke up screaming, her cries echoing through the cabin. On those nights, Jed would leave his bed and sit beside her, speaking softly until her tears subsided. "You're safe now," he'd say, repeating the words like a mantra. "No one can hurt you here." Over time, the nightmares lessened, replaced by peaceful sleep. It was during these quiet moments that Jed realized just how much responsibility he had taken on. These girls weren't just survivors. They were children who needed stability, love, and guidance. And somehow it fell to him to provide all of that. As weeks turned into months, the bond between Jed and the sisters deepened. They began opening up to him, sharing fragments of their lives before the ranch. Lila spoke of her father, a kind man who loved telling stories by the fire. Rose recalled afternoons spent painting pictures with sticks in the dirt, dreaming of becoming an artist someday. Even little Daisy shared tales of chasing butterflies in the meadow near their old home. Listening to their stories, Jed couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness for all they had lost. Yet he also saw resilience in them, a strength that refused to be broken. One afternoon, as Jed worked on repairing a broken fence, Lila approached him hesitantly. In her hands, she held a piece of paper covered in scribbles. "I've been practicing writing," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you think I'm doing okay?" Jed wiped his hands on his shirt and took the paper from her. Though the letters were uneven and the words misspelled, he could see the effort she had put into it. Smiling warmly, he nodded. "You're doing great," he told her. "Keep practicing, and soon you'll be better than me." Encouraged by his praise, Lila began teaching her younger sisters what she had learned. Together, they practiced reading and writing using old books Jed had found in the attic. Some were tattered and missing pages, but they served their purpose. Rose developed a fascination with poetry, reciting lines aloud in her sweet voice. Daisy, though still too young to understand most of the words, enjoyed flipping through the colorful illustrations. Watching them learn and grow filled Jed with a sense of pride he hadn't felt in years. But life on the ranch wasn't without its challenges. Supplies were limited and money was scarce. Jed often went without meals so the girls could eat, telling them he wasn't hungry when they asked why his plate was empty. He sold some of his cattle to buy fabric for clothes and shoes that fit properly, knowing the worn-out rags they wore wouldn't last much longer. Neighbors occasionally offered help, bringing baskets of food or offering to mend fences, but Jed usually declined. He didn't want anyone thinking he couldn't take care of the girls on his own. Still, the kindness of others reminded him that not everyone in the world was cruel. Word of Jed's actions eventually spread throughout the community. At first, people whispered behind closed doors, unsure what to make of the angry cowboy who had suddenly taken in 3 orphaned sisters. Some admired his bravery and selflessness, calling him a hero. Others were skeptical, questioning his motives and spreading rumors. "He must have ulterior intentions," one man muttered at the local saloon. "No one takes in strangers out of the goodness of their heart." Such talk reached Jed's ears, but he paid it no mind. What mattered most was the well-being of the girls, not the opinions of those who didn't know him. Despite the gossip, many townsfolk couldn't deny the positive changes happening at the ranch. When they passed by, they saw the sisters playing in the fields, their laughter carrying on the wind. They noticed how Jed treated them, not as burdens, but as family. Slowly, attitudes began to shift. One day, a group of women from the church arrived at the ranch with baskets of homemade pies and fresh bread. "We heard you could use a little help," one of them said, smiling warmly. Jed thanked them graciously, accepting their gifts without hesitation. From then on, the visits became regular, bringing not only food but also companionship for the girls. As the seasons changed, so did the dynamics within the household. The sisters flourished under Jed's care, each finding her own place in the world. Lila took charge of managing the household, ensuring chores were done and meals were prepared. Her confidence grew with each passing day, and she started helping Jed with decision-making on the ranch. Rose continued to nurture her artistic talents, creating paintings that captured the beauty of the landscape around them. She dreamed of opening her own gallery someday, a dream Jed encouraged wholeheartedly. Little Daisy remained his constant companion, always eager to lend a hand, or at least try. Though she often caused mischief, her cheerful spirit brightened even the darkest days. Through it all, Jed marveled at how much his life had transformed. Once a solitary man content with his own company, he now found joy in the chaos of raising 3 young girls. Their presence brought warmth to his once lonely home, filling it with laughter and light. And though he never imagined himself as a father figure, he embraced the role with surprising ease. The anger that had once defined him softened, replaced by patience and compassion. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting vibrant hues across the sky, Jed sat on the porch with the girls. They talked about their dreams for the future, where they wanted to go, what they hoped to achieve. For the first time in a long while, Jed allowed himself to dream too. He envisioned a life where the sisters thrived, where they pursued their passions and built happy lives for themselves. And maybe, just maybe, he thought, he might find happiness alongside them. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Jed leaned back in his chair, listening to the girls chatter. Despite the hardships they had faced, and the ones that undoubtedly lay ahead, he felt a profound sense of peace. He had saved them from a bleak fate, yes, but in doing so, they had saved him too. Together they had created something rare and beautiful, a family bound not by blood, but by love and resilience. And as the cool breeze rustled through the trees, Jed knew that whatever challenges came their way, they would face them together. As the months rolled by, life at Jed's ranch settled into a rhythm that felt almost natural. The days began early, with the sun painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink. Jed would rise before anyone else, stepping outside to check on the animals and tend to the fields. By the time he returned to the cabin, the girls were usually awake, bustling around as they prepared for the day ahead. Lila had taken charge of breakfast, her hands moving deftly as she stirred pots or flipped pancakes on the stove. Rose often helped her, humming softly while arranging wildflowers in a jar to brighten the table. Little Daisy, still too young for heavy chores, darted between them, eager to assist in any way she could. The sisters' transformation was remarkable. What had once been fear and uncertainty in their eyes was now replaced by a quiet confidence. They laughed more freely, spoke louder, and even began teasing each other like siblings do. Jed watched these changes with pride, though he rarely said so aloud. Instead, he showed his approval through small gestures, a pat on the back for Daisy when she finished feeding the chickens, a nod of thanks to Lila for keeping the house tidy, or an encouraging word to Rose whenever she unveiled a new painting. These moments might have seemed insignificant to others, but to the girls they meant everything. Yet, not all was smooth sailing. There were still challenges to face, both big and small. Supplies remained scarce, especially during the winter, months when snow blanketed the fields and made travel difficult. On particularly cold nights, Jed would bundle extra blankets around the girls, ensuring they stayed warm while he sat by the fire, keeping watch. Sometimes hunger gnawed at them all, but Jed always found ways to stretch what little food they had. He hunted game when necessary, traded with neighbors when possible, and taught the girls how to preserve fruits and vegetables for leaner times. The hardest part, however, wasn't the physical hardships. It was dealing with the lingering scars from their past. Though the girls were safe now, memories of their cruel stepmother and the auction at the saloon haunted them. Nightmares still plagued Lila, waking her with tears streaming down her face. Rose sometimes withdrew into herself, staring out the window for hours without speaking. Even cheerful Daisy had moments when her smile faltered, replaced by a look of sadness that broke Jed's heart. Each time this happened, Jed reminded himself that healing took time. He didn't push them to talk about their pain unless they wanted to. Instead, he offered comfort in silence, sitting beside them until their fears subsided. Despite these struggles, the bond between Jed and the girls only grew stronger. They began to rely on him not just as a protector, but as a confidant and friend. One evening after dinner, Lila approached him hesitantly. "Jed," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "do you think we'll ever see our stepmother again?" The question hung heavy in the air, and for a moment Jed wasn't sure how to answer. Finally, he shook his head firmly. "No," he said. "She won't come near you anymore. I promise." His words seemed to ease some of the tension in Lila's shoulders, and she nodded gratefully before returning to her seat. Moments like these reinforced Jed's role in their lives. He wasn't just providing shelter and food. He was giving them hope. Hope that they could leave their painful past behind and build a better future. And slowly but surely, they started believing it too. Outside the ranch, the community's opinion of Jed continued to evolve. At first, many had been skeptical of his intentions, whispering rumors about why a single man would take in 3 young girls. But as time passed, those doubts faded. People saw the genuine care and effort Jed put into raising the sisters. They noticed how happy the girls seemed, how much they had grown under his guidance. Neighbors who once avoided him now stopped by, regularly, bringing gifts or offering help. Some brought clothes for the girls, others shared fresh produce from their gardens. A local teacher even offered to give Lila lessons in reading and arithmetic, impressed by her determination to learn. Jed accepted their kindness graciously, though he remained cautious about letting outsiders get too close. He knew gossip could spread quickly, and he didn't want anything jeopardizing the fragile peace they had built. Still, the support meant a great deal to him. It reminded him that despite the harshness of the world, there were still good people willing to lend a hand. One day, a traveling preacher came to town and invited Jed and the girls to attend Sunday service. Jed hesitated at first. He wasn't a religious man and preferred to keep to himself, but the girls begged him to go. "Please, Jed," Rose pleaded, clutching his sleeve. "We've never been to church before." Seeing the excitement in their eyes, he relented. That Sunday, they dressed in their best clothes, patched and worn but clean, and walked together to the small wooden chapel on the edge of town. The experience was overwhelming for the girls. They marveled at the hymns sung by the choir, the colorful stained glass windows, and the warmth of the congregation. After the service, several parishioners greeted them warmly, praising Jed for his generosity. One elderly woman pressed a loaf of bread into Lila's hand, saying, "For your family." The word struck Jed deeply. Family. It was something he hadn't allowed himself to think about for years, yet here it was, staring him in the face. As they walked home that afternoon, the girls chattered excitedly about the sermon and the songs, while Jed walked silently, lost in thought. Back at the ranch, life resumed its usual pace. Spring arrived, bringing with it new growth and opportunities. Jed expanded the vegetable garden, teaching the girls how to plant seeds and care for the sprouts. Together, they watched as tiny green shoots emerged from the soil, a symbol of renewal and possibility. Rose painted scenes of the blooming flowers, capturing their vibrant colors on canvas. Daisy delighted in chasing butterflies, her laughter echoing across the fields. Even Lila, who had carried so much responsibility on her young shoulders, allowed herself moments of joy, skipping through the meadow with her sisters. But as much as things improved, Jed couldn't shake the feeling that trouble might be brewing on the horizon. Rumors reached him of men in nearby towns upset about losing their chance to buy the sisters at the auction. Some claimed they wanted revenge, accusing Jed of interfering where he didn't belong. Others muttered about reclaiming what they believed was rightfully theirs. Though no direct threats had been made, Jed knew better than to ignore such talk. He began taking precautions, reinforcing the fences around the ranch and keeping his rifle close at hand. He also taught the girls what to do if strangers came knocking: hide in the cellar and stay quiet until he gave the all clear. The tension weighed heavily on him, but he hid it well from the girls. To them, he remained the steadfast figure they had come to trust. Only late at night, when the house was quiet and the stars twinkled above, did Jed allow himself to worry. He thought about the future, what lay ahead for the girls, and whether he could truly protect them from harm. Yet, every time doubt crept in, he reminded himself of one thing. He had promised to keep them safe, and he intended to honor that promise no matter what. One evening, as they gathered around the fireplace, Jed decided to share a story from his own childhood. It was rare for him to speak about his past, but tonight he felt compelled to open up. "When I was your age," he began, his deep voice steady, "I lived on a ranch much like this one. My father taught me everything I know about cattle and crops, but one day bandits came and burned it all down. We lost everything: our home, our animals, our livelihood." The girls listened intently, their eyes wide with curiosity. "It was hard," Jed continued, "but we rebuilt, and we survived. Because no matter how tough things get, you can always find a way forward if you stick together." His words resonated deeply with the sisters. For Lila, it was a reminder of resilience. For Rose, it sparked inspiration for her art. And for Daisy, it planted a seed of courage she didn't know she possessed. As they drifted off to sleep that night, wrapped in blankets and dreams of brighter days, Jed sat by the fire, gazing into the flames. He didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain: whatever storms came their way, they would face them together, as a family. The calm that had settled over Jed's ranch was shattered one crisp autumn morning. The air carried a chill, and golden leaves swirled in the breeze as Jed stepped outside to begin his daily routine. But something felt off. The usual sounds of birds chirping and cattle lowing were absent, replaced by an eerie silence. His instincts kicked in immediately. Grabbing his rifle, he scanned the horizon, his sharp eyes catching movement near the edge of the property. Strangers on horseback lingered there, their figures silhouetted against the rising sun. They weren't locals. Jed recognized that much from their attire and the way they carried themselves. For days, these men had been watching the ranch, lurking just beyond the fence line. Jed knew why they were here. Word of his actions at the Dome saloon months ago had traveled farther than he'd anticipated, stirring resentment among those who felt cheated out of their purchase. These men weren't interested in negotiating or reasoning. They wanted revenge. And if they couldn't get it through force, they might try something worse: taking the girls back. Jed didn't waste time panicking. Instead, he acted quickly, gathering the sisters inside the cabin and explaining the situation in simple terms. "There are dangerous people nearby," he told them, his voice steady but firm. "They won't hurt you. I won't let them. But we need to be careful." Lila nodded solemnly, her protective instincts kicking in as she ushered Rose and Daisy into the cellar. It was a small, dark space beneath the house where they kept canned goods and supplies, but it would serve as a hiding spot if trouble came, calling. Jed handed Lila a lantern and gave her strict instructions. "Stay quiet, no matter what happens." Once the girls were safely hidden, Jed turned his attention to fortifying the ranch. He moved tools and barrels to block windows and doors, creating makeshift barriers that would slow anyone trying to break in. He loaded his rifle and placed extra ammunition within easy reach, knowing he might have to defend not just himself, but also the fragile sanctuary he had built for the sisters. As he worked, memories of his own childhood flooded back. The bandits who had destroyed his family's home, the fear of losing everything. This time, though, it wasn't just his life at stake. It was theirs. By nightfall, the tension was palpable. The men outside hadn't made a move yet, but their presence loomed like a storm cloud waiting to burst. Jed stayed awake, pacing between the front door and the window, keeping watch. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves outside, set his nerves on edge. Hours passed in agonizing silence until finally, just before dawn, the attack came. The sound of galloping hooves broke the stillness, followed by shouts and the crash of wood splintering as the intruders rammed open the gate. Jed steadied himself, gripping his rifle tightly as he positioned himself behind the barricaded doorway. The first man to enter didn't stand a chance. Jed fired a single shot, hitting him squarely in the shoulder. The man cried out in pain, stumbling backward and alerting his companions. Chaos erupted as the rest of the group stormed the cabin, yelling threats and firing blindly into the darkness. Jed fought with every ounce of strength and skill he possessed. Years of living on the frontier had taught him how to handle himself in a fight, and now that knowledge became his greatest weapon. He moved swiftly, ducking behind furniture and returning fire whenever he spotted an opening. Bullets whizzed past him, embedding themselves in walls and shattering glass, but he refused to falter. Each shot he fired was deliberate, aimed not to kill but to incapacitate, to buy time and protect the girls hidden below. Inside the cellar, the sisters clung to each other, trembling as the sounds of gunfire echoed above them. Lila held Daisy, close, whispering reassurances even as tears streamed down her face. Rose gripped a heavy jar of preserves, ready to use it as a weapon if necessary. Though terrified, none of them dared to make a sound. They trusted Jed implicitly, believing he would keep them safe no matter what. The battle raged on for what felt like hours, though in reality, it lasted only minutes. One by one, the attackers fell back, overwhelmed by Jed's relentless defense. Realizing they were outnumbered and outmatched, the remaining men retreated, dragging their wounded comrades with them. When the last hoofbeat faded into the distance, silence descended once more, broken only by the faint crackle of smoldering wood and the distant call of a crow. Jed waited several minutes before lowering his rifle, ensuring the coast was truly clear. His body ached from the adrenaline rush and his hands trembled slightly as he reloaded the weapon. Only then did he allow himself to check on the girls. Pushing aside the barrels blocking the cellar door, he called down softly, "It's safe now. You can come up." Lila emerged first, her face pale but determined. Behind her, Rose and Daisy followed, their wide eyes scanning the room for signs of destruction. The cabin was a mess, broken furniture, shattered glass, and scorch marks on the walls. But everyone was alive. That fact alone was enough to bring relief flooding over them. Lila threw her arms around Jed, sobbing uncontrollably. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Rose and Daisy joined in, hugging him tightly as though afraid to let go. Though the immediate danger had passed, Jed knew they weren't out of the woods yet. The men who had attacked wouldn't give up easily, and reinforcements could arrive at any moment. He decided they needed to leave the ranch temporarily and seek refuge elsewhere. Packing only the essentials, food, water, blankets, and a few personal belongings, they loaded everything onto a wagon and prepared to depart. Before leaving, Jed took one last look at the place he had called home for so many years. Smoke curled lazily from the damaged roof, and the fields lay trampled underfoot. It pained him to abandon it, but he reminded himself that homes could be rebuilt. Lives couldn't. With a deep breath, he climbed onto the wagon seat beside Lila and flicked the reins, urging the horses forward. Their journey took them to a neighboring town, where Jed had friends who owed him favors. An old rancher named Sam agreed to shelter them for as long as needed, offering his spare barn as a temporary home. The girls adjusted surprisingly well to their new surroundings, finding comfort in the kindness of strangers. Sam's wife, Martha, doted on them, sewing new dresses and teaching them recipes she had learned from her mother. For the first time in weeks, laughter returned to their lives, filling the barn with warmth despite its humble conditions. During this period, Jed focused on planning his next steps. He reached out to trusted allies in nearby towns, asking for help in tracking down the men who had attacked his ranch. News of the incident spread quickly, drawing both sympathy and outrage from the community. Many offered to assist, whether by providing information, lending weapons, or joining a posse to confront the attackers. Jed accepted their support gratefully, knowing he couldn't face this threat alone. As preparations continued, the bond between Jed and the sisters deepened even further. They saw a side of him they hadn't witnessed before, not just as a protector, but as a leader willing to risk everything for their safety. In turn, they vowed to stand by him, no matter what happened. Lila insisted on helping pack supplies, while Rose painted pictures of imagined victories to boost morale. Even little Daisy pitched in, tying knots in ropes and practicing her aim with a slingshot Jed had given her. Finally, the day came when Jed and his allies set out to confront the attackers. The sisters watched anxiously as he mounted his horse, his expression grim but resolute. "We'll be back soon," he promised, tipping his hat to them. "Stay strong." Then, with a final glance over his shoulder, he rode off into the horizon, surrounded by a group of determined men ready to fight for justice. Back at the barn, the girls prayed silently for his safe return. Though fear lingered in their hearts, they drew strength from the lessons Jed had taught them, lessons of resilience, courage, and hope. Whatever the outcome, they knew one thing for certain: they were no longer victims. They were survivors, united by love and loyalty, and nothing could break that bond. Days later, when Jed returned victorious, battered but alive, the reunion was nothing short of miraculous. The girls ran to him, tears streaming down their faces as they hugged him tightly. Together they celebrated not just his triumph, but also the indomitable spirit that had brought them all this far. And those scars remained, from the battle. From their past, the future seemed brighter than ever before. The victory Jed and his allies achieved against the attackers was more than just a win. It was a turning point. The men who had threatened the ranch were either captured or driven far away, their plans for revenge crushed under the weight of justice served by the community. News of the showdown spread quickly through the West, carried by word of mouth and exaggerated tales in saloons. Some called it a heroic stand. Others labeled it a lesson in what happened when greed met defiance. But for Jed and the sisters, it meant something deeper: safety. For the first time since they arrived at the ranch, they could breathe freely, without looking over their shoulders. When Jed returned to Sam's farm, weary but unbroken, the girls greeted him with overwhelming joy. Lila threw her arms around him, crying tears of relief, while Rose clung to his side, her small hands gripping his shirt as if afraid he might disappear again. Little Daisy jumped up and down, shouting, "You came back! You came back!" Her voice echoed across the barnyard, drawing smiles from everyone nearby. Even Martha, Sam's wife, wiped away a tear as she watched the reunion. It was clear to anyone who saw them that these four people shared a bond stronger than blood, a family forged through hardship and love. But life couldn't stay paused forever. Though the immediate danger had passed, the ranch was no longer habitable. The damage from the attack was extensive, with parts of the cabin burned to ashes and the fields trampled beyond repair. Rebuilding would take time, effort, and resources Jed didn't currently have. Still, he refused to give up on the place that had become their home. He decided they would return to the ranch once repairs began, even if it meant living in tents or makeshift shelters during the process. The land held too many memories, good ones now, to abandon it completely. In the meantime, the sisters settled into their temporary life at Sam's farm. They adapted quickly, finding comfort in routine and the kindness of strangers. Lila helped Martha with cooking and cleaning, learning new recipes and tricks in the kitchen. Rose spent hours painting scenes inspired by the countryside, her talent growing with each brushstroke. She often gave her finished works to Sam and Martha as tokens of gratitude, brightening the walls of their modest farmhouse. Daisy, ever energetic, roamed the property with Sam's grandchildren, chasing chickens and climbing trees. Her laughter filled the air, a reminder that childhood could still thrive even after tragedy. Jed, however, struggled to adjust to this quieter existence. Used to working long days under the open sky, he found himself restless and uneasy, staying idle. To occupy his mind, he joined Sam in repairing fences and tending to livestock, lending his skills wherever needed. At night, he sat by the fire, staring into the flames. His thoughts of the future weighed heavily on him. How could he ensure the girls' happiness? What kind of life could he offer them moving forward? These questions haunted him, but instead of letting doubt consume him, he turned his focus outward, to the people who had rallied behind him. The support Jed received from the community surprised even him. Neighbors brought supplies for the rebuilding effort, offering lumber, nails, and tools. A local carpenter volunteered to help construct a new cabin, while farmers donated seedlings to replant the fields. Even those who had once doubted Jed's intentions now praised his courage and dedication, calling him a true guardian of the West. This outpouring of generosity touched him deeply, reminding him that despite its flaws, humanity still held goodness within it. One evening, as Jed sat outside watching the sunset, Sam approached him with 2 cups of coffee. Handing one to Jed, he said, "You've done right by those girls, son. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Jed nodded slowly, sipping the warm drink as he gazed at the horizon. "It's not about me," he replied after a moment. "It's about giving them a chance, a real chance, at a better life." Sam chuckled softly, patting him on the shoulder. "And you're doing just that. Just don't forget to take care of yourself along the way." That conversation stayed with Jed, planting a seed of reflection. He realized that while he had given everything to protect the girls, he hadn't allowed himself much room for personal growth. His anger, once a defining trait, had softened over the months, replaced by patience and compassion. He had learned to trust others, to accept help when needed, and to find joy in the simple moments. These changes weren't always easy, but they were necessary for both him and the sisters. As winter approached, preparations for returning to the ranch intensified. With the help of volunteers, a sturdy cabin rose from the ashes of the old one. Large windows let in sunlight, warming wooden floors polished smooth by careful hands. A fresh coat of paint brightened the exterior, and flower beds sprouted around the perimeter, planted by rows with seeds gifted by neighbors. The fields were plowed anew, ready for spring planting, and the animals grazed peacefully in repaired pastures. Slowly but surely, the ranch transformed from a scene of destruction into a symbol of hope. On the day they finally moved back, the sisters stood in awe of their renewed home. "It's beautiful," Lila whispered, her eyes shining with pride. Rose ran ahead, spinning in circles as she admired the wildflowers blooming near the porch. Daisy giggled, racing toward the barn to check on the horses. Watching them, Jed felt a deep sense of fulfillment. This wasn't just a house or a piece of land, it was a sanctuary, built with love and resilience. Life resumed its rhythm, but this time with a sense of permanence. The sisters thrived under Jed's guidance, each pursuing her own dreams. Lila took on more responsibilities around the ranch, proving herself capable and dependable. She dreamed of becoming a teacher someday, inspired by the lessons she had received from the local schoolmaster. Rose continued to paint, her works gaining recognition at a nearby market where she sold them for modest prices. Her dream of opening an art gallery seemed less distant now, and Daisy, ever curious, followed. Jed everywhere, asking endless questions about farming, animals, and the stars above. Her ambition to become a veterinarian grew stronger with each passing day. Jed, too, found peace in his role as their guardian. He no longer saw himself as the angry cowboy who acted on impulse. Instead, he embraced the man he had become. Steadfast, compassionate, and wise. Though scars from his past remained, they no longer defined him. Instead, they served as reminders of how far he had come and how much he had gained. Yet, the journey wasn't without challenges. Supplies remained limited and money was tight, especially as they worked to restore the ranch fully. But the girls never complained. They understood the value of hard work and appreciated every meal, every warm bed, every moment of laughter. Together they faced hardships head-on, supporting one another through thick and thin. One spring morning, as the sun rose over the hills, Jed gathered the sisters on the porch. "This is your home now," he told them, his voice steady yet filled with emotion. "No matter where life takes you, remember this place. and remember that you'll always have each other." The girls nodded, their eyes glistening with unshed tears. They knew what he meant, that family wasn't defined by bloodlines but by the bonds they had created together. Over the years, the sisters grew into strong, independent women, thanks to Jed's unwavering support. Lila married a kind-hearted farmer from a neighboring town, building a life filled with love and purpose. Rose opened her art gallery, showcasing not only her own work, but also pieces from other aspiring artists. Daisy pursued her dream of becoming a veterinarian, traveling to study medicine and eventually returning to set up a clinic near the ranch. Through it all, they remained close, visiting Jed regularly and bringing their own families to celebrate holidays and milestones. Jed, now older and grayer, watched with pride as the girls flourished. His once lonely existence had transformed into a legacy of love and redemption. He often sat on the porch, gazing at the horizon, thinking about the path that had led him here. It hadn't been easy, but every sacrifice, every struggle had been worth it. The angry cowboy who had once roamed the plains alone was gone, replaced by a man surrounded by laughter, warmth, and the knowledge that he had made a difference. And so, the story of Jed and the three sisters became legend in the West, not because of wealth or fame, but because of the power of kindness, courage, and the belief that even in the darkest times, light can shine through. Their lives proved that sometimes, saving others saves us too. Years passed, and the ranch that had once been a battleground transformed into a symbol of hope and renewal. The scars of the past faded, replaced by laughter, growth, and new beginnings. Jed's hair turned silver, and lines etched themselves onto his weathered face, but his spirit remained as strong as ever. He had become more than just a cowboy or a guardian. He was a father figure, a mentor, and a friend to the three sisters, who had grown into remarkable women under his care. Lila, now married to a gentle farmer named Thomas, lived in a cozy house not far from the ranch. She visited often, bringing fresh bread and stories of her own growing family. Her husband admired her strength and determination, qualities she had learned from Jed. Together, they worked their land with the same passion and resilience that Lila had seen on the ranch. When their first child, a baby girl, was born, they named her after Jed, calling her Jedda as a tribute to the man who had saved them all. Every time Jed held the little girl in his arms, he felt a deep sense of pride, knowing that his legacy would continue through her. Rose's dreams of becoming an artist came true when she opened her gallery in the nearest town. Her paintings captured the beauty of the West, the rolling hills, vibrant sunsets, and wildflowers that dotted the landscape. People traveled from miles away to see her work, drawn not only by her talent, but also by the emotion behind each piece. Rose never forgot where she came from. Many of her paintings featured scenes from the ranch, immortalizing the place that had given her a second chance at life. On weekends, she returned home to paint outdoors, setting up her easel near the fields where Daisy played as a child. Jed loved watching her create, marveling at how far she had come from the shy girl who once hid behind her sisters. Daisy, the youngest, pursued her dream of becoming a veterinarian with relentless determination. After years of studying and working hard, she opened a small clinic near the ranch, treating animals both big and small. Farmers from surrounding areas brought their livestock to her, trusting her skill and compassion. Daisy's clinic quickly became a hub of activity, filled with wagging tails, curious calves, and grateful owners. Despite her busy schedule, she always found time to visit Jed, sharing tales of her adventures and asking for advice. To her, Jed was still the wise cowboy who had taught her everything she knew about caring for animals, and about life itself. Though the sisters had built lives of their own, they remained deeply connected to the ranch and to each other. Holidays were celebrated together, with tables groaning under the weight of homemade dishes and laughter echoing through the house. Birthdays were marked with cakes baked by Lila, gifts painted by Rose, and playful antics orchestrated by Daisy. Even Jed joined in the fun, telling old stories of his youth and teaching the younger generation how to ride horses or mend fences. These gatherings weren't just celebrations, they were reminders of how far they had come and how much they owed to one another. The community, too, embraced Jed and the sisters as part of its fabric. What had once been skepticism and gossip turned into admiration and respect. Neighbors invited them to weddings, barn raisings, and church services. Children looked up to Daisy as a role model, while adults sought Rose's artistic touch for special occasions. Lila's kindness made her a beloved figure in the town, and Jed's quiet wisdom earned him a seat of honor among elders. Together, they proved that even those who start with nothing can build something meaningful if given love and opportunity. Yet despite the joy and success that surrounded them, Jed couldn't escape the passage of time. His body, once robust and tireless, began to slow down. Morning chores took longer, and evenings were spent resting in his rocking chair rather than fixing fences. The girls noticed these changes but said little, choosing instead to show their gratitude in small ways. Lila brought extra blankets to keep him warm during chilly nights. Rose painted portraits of him, capturing his rugged features and kind eyes. And Daisy stopped by daily, checking on him and making sure he ate properly. It was clear to everyone that Jed wasn't just growing older, he was leaving behind a legacy that would endure long after he was gone. One summer evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the fields, Jed sat on the porch with the sisters gathered around him. They talked about the future, their plans, their hopes, and the memories they cherished most. For a moment there was silence, broken only by the chirping of crickets and the rustle of leaves in the breeze. Then Jed spoke, his voice soft but steady. "You've done well," he said, looking at each of them in turn. "You've built lives full of purpose and happiness. That's all I ever wanted for you." Tears welled up in their eyes, but they didn't interrupt. "This ranch," he continued, gesturing toward the land around them, "is yours now. Take care of it, just like you've taken care of each other. And remember, you're stronger together than apart." His words hung in the air, carrying the weight of a lifetime of sacrifice and love. Though none of them wanted to think about a world without Jed, they understood what he meant. This wasn't goodbye. It was a passing of the torch, a reminder that the bonds they shared would outlast any single person. In the months that followed, Jed grew weaker, spending more time indoors and less time tending to the ranch. But his presence remained a guiding force for the sisters. They worked together to maintain the property, ensuring that every fence was mended, every crop harvested, and every animal cared for. Their unity gave them strength, just as Jed had always taught them. When winter arrived, blanketing the fields in snow, Jed passed away peacefully in his sleep, surrounded by the people he loved most. The loss hit the sisters hard, but they found comfort in knowing that Jed's spirit lived on in the ranch and in their hearts. They buried him beneath a tall oak tree near the house, marking the spot with a simple wooden cross. Around it they planted wildflowers, Rose's favorite, to honor his memory. On sunny days, they could almost imagine him sitting there, watching over them like he always had. Life went on, shaped by the lessons Jed had instilled in them. Lila raised her children with the same values of hard work and kindness. Rose's gallery flourished, inspiring others to pursue their dreams. And Daisy's clinic became a cornerstone of the community, saving countless animals and earning her widespread respect. Each of them carried a piece of Jed with them, whether it was his courage, his patience, or his unwavering belief in doing what was right. Decades later, when the sisters were old women themselves, they still gathered at the ranch to celebrate birthdays, anniversaries, and holidays. The cabin had been updated, the fields replanted, and the fences repaired countless times, but the heart of the place remained unchanged. It was a testament to the power of love, resilience, and family, a legacy built not on wealth or fame, but on the simple act of choosing to protect and nurture those in need. And so the story of Jed and the three sisters endured, told and retold by generations of descendants who owed their existence to the choices made by one angry cowboy many years ago. In the end, it wasn't gold or glory that defined him. It was the lives he touched and the hope he inspired. As long as the ranch stood and the wildflowers bloomed, his memory would live on, reminding everyone who heard the tale that sometimes The greatest acts of heroism are born not from strength, but from love.